Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of the Safehouse Podcast. We're excited. We're ready to get into more stories, and we got really good feedback from the last one. With me in the studio again today is Pastor Bob Denon, my dad. Good to see you again.
Good
Obviously,
to see you.
I see you every day.
Pretty much.
It's awesome, but it's great. You got it rocking a new do today.
Yeah. I just couldn't take it anymore.
We're in the
My
middle,
hair.
obviously, of this global pandemic where everybody's quarantined and self-isolating and trying to, social distance from their normal routines. And our hair is just one of the things that are being affected by that. I'm wearing a hat because I don't have my hair cut.
I have someone a fishing friend of mine. His name is Joe Carter, and he made mention of it a couple weeks ago when we were doing the updates for Safehouse, and he was like, "That mop needs to be taken care of." And so, Joe, this is for you. If you're watching, just thanks for putting that encouraging word out to me that I look like a bum and I needed to get a haircut. So
looks good.
Yeah. Between myself, my daughter, and her boyfriend, we were able to knock it out.
Did it figured out.
Yeah.
Also, with in the studio with us is Brandon, as usual. Brandon, how you doing, buddy?
I'm not doing too bad. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you again.
Always a pleasure.
We got the first one up and got it out there. People are watching it and listening.
I'm feeling pretty good about it.
I'm excited.
How do you feel?
I feel good.
Yeah.
I feel like we're gonna get better and better.
I agree.
I hope. Anyway,
we can only get better.
Only get better. That's
It's surprising if we got worse.
You'd be surprised how many times that
I don't know. I've been able to get worse.
Good feedback. Let me say this first of all. Again, this is available everywhere you can get a podcast. But we had some people actually comment and ask and say, "Hey, can we get the mugs or the shirts or the hats?"
Yeah.
We had a lot of merch that we were wearing, not realizing that people may want it. So to respond to that, we don't right now have anything that's available to purchase or buy, but we're going to get it. We're going to work on that. And so we'll keep you posted. We'll announce it on here. We'll put a link on, Facebook's or the website or whatever. So I want to encourage you guys, if you didn't after last week, go watch the teddy bear video. Please do. A lot of people did a lot of work to make it something consumable that's like fun and engaging, and I think it really is impactful. Safehousersd.com. Look for the teddy bear tab, and then click on that, and then you can watch the vision of why Safehouse exists, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So last week we talked about kind of the story about how we got to where we are, but there's so many like rabbit trails that we could have gone on, and so what we're going to do over the next few weeks, we don't really have a set time. We have like 5 or 6 kind of, we're calling them benchmark stories that have kind of created driven us to be where we are and helped kind of develop the character that we have now and have chiseled us and sharpened us. And ironically enough, they were always times that were super difficult. I mean, it was never easy. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about one of those stories specifically.
Well, I guess,
but before we get into that, Mom, it was really funny because my mom, who's kind of a savant with dates, all of a sudden yesterday, I got a text message. This is true. I was sitting at Refuge's office, and I got a text message that just said, "Your dad started working at Murphy's in 82. Then the church was 94, and there was no context to it. And I realized that at that point she was watching the podcast and she was correcting all of our dates, which I don't think that we got many of them wrong. We were within a few months at least. And
well, I think we have to always put a disclaimer when you and I are talking that the dates could be off a few years or so. Yeah,
like plus or minus something 2 years.
At least.
I think is a fair range of time. But yeah, she was correcting it. And then you sent me a picture, because one of the stories we told last week was how you started as a volunteer youth pastor, a youth service called T4C.
Correct.
And I mentioned the shirts. Be prepared. Here we go. My mom, who keeps everything and knows dates, these are actual shirts.
It's up
this
to Angie.
Isn't redesigned.
Nope.
This is
with all the dirt and everything that she couldn't get out of the shirt. And all
this is a mall classic, right? Like T4C airbrushed onto, let's see, Hanes. Yes. Oh no, just some off-brand t-shirt. Yeah, we couldn't afford Hanes.
Well, we had to buy the t-shirt and actually take it to the guy.
So you're walking in with t-shirts, a bag of t-shirts. And
no, we didn't afford that many. We had like 2 or 3.
2 or 3.
Yeah, that was
T4C. Now here we are.
Funny. That's funny.
And so we we just had to show that. And what we're going to do today, like I said, is tell another story. You worked at Murphy's, and then you felt the call to become a senior pastor of a local church. The church was located in Liberty Township, which is near Youngstown, if you're not from this area, and Northeast Ohio. And you were there we pastored for 10 years, give or take.
Over 10 years.
And so the big thing that led to Safehouse becoming the organization that it is today is what we're going to kind of dive into. And so many people were a huge part of kind of developing what was at that point just a youth group.
Yep.
Right. And I don't mean that to minimize that when I say just a youth group. It was just a typical, church internal like youth ministry. It
Correct.
had 16 to 20 kids. We'd meet on a Wednesday night. There'd be like a bit of a worship kind of time. There'd be a sermon. And then this goes back all the way. I mean, I was probably 12, 13 years old because we moved when I was like 10, 11. And then there's no kids when I started, except for like a couple grandkids of the older patrons of the church.
Right.
And then it just kind of grew into this thing, huge neighborhood behind us, not a huge neighborhood behind us, but a neighborhood full of kids behind us. And so we started reaching into that thing and kids started coming. We started doing a youth group. So let's start from there. We had this youth group, and from there, we just met on Wednesday nights. We had church Sunday morning, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights.
Yeah. I remember our first service there was about 10 people in the church.
Your first Sunday morning service?
Yeah.
10 people.
Yeah.
And wasn't there, didn't you tell me one time that like one half of the aisle was like mad at the other half of the aisle?
Yes. When I first started, there was like 5 people sitting on the back pew, and they were mad at the other 5 people that were sitting on the back pew on the other side. And there was 11 pews empty between me and them and the podium that was in front. And I remember that being my first Sunday there. You guys hadn't moved yet, but I remember that being my first Sunday there. And I ended up taking up the offering. I was the Sunday school teacher and the pastor at the time. And
you had Sunday school too?
Yeah, and I didn't realize that that they didn't like each other at first. Now, down the road, they became best friends. When a few people in the church kind of turned on the vision, they became really good friends. Because they
found something in common.
Correct. And and so it was kind of weird to start off with. And
that would be more than a little unnerving.
I remember praying the first week or two that we were there. I'd get up because I was still working at Murphy's, and I'd get up early in the morning about 5 a.m. I go to those 2 back pews, and I prayed. I would alternate each day, and I would pray that God would unify us, but also that God would bring and surround me with people that were smarter than I was. It was really what I asked for. Mm-hmm. And now when I look at what we've got of all the professionals and all the people, I still remember those prayers that morning early, just saying, God, first of all, I don't know what I'm involved in here to fix this. And second of all, I'm going to need some help is what I'm going to need. And so bring me the people to help do what we need to do, not knowing that we're ending up where we've ended up today.
So your first Sunday, 5 people on either side, lots of prayers, lots of requests. At what point did it turn? I mean, and when I say turn, it started to grow.
It slowly started growing when we just had consistency in the church. It slowly began to grow.
Because they had gone back and forth. They didn't have consistency at the pastor position for a long time, right?
No, I think I was like the 14th pastor in less than 30 years or something like that. Yeah,
nobody stayed around.
Yeah, there for a period of time, they had a pastor a year is what they did. And with the controlling mechanism that was in the church, looking back on it now, I can understand that.
Is it within the local church or the organization?
No, within the local church.
Okay.
The local church was very strong, had some very strong people that had embedded into the local church and basically were the ownership of the local church. The show. Which is okay. You just got to realize how to maneuver yourself with them, get their vision, what their vision is, what they want to do. But that ended up getting in the way once again for us down the road, which really caused some problems. We just began to cast a vision of what it could be. I remember that I canceled Sunday night services, and we used to do prayer walks in the community.
I remember those. We'd walk up and down the streets praying for the community.
Yep, and we would just walk around on Sunday night and pray over the community. And then I ended up spending a few weeks knocking on all the doors in the neighborhood, and we would do some door knockers and just kind of lay things out at them. And found out that the first mile radius, we got accepted. We hardly had any doors closed and said we're not interested. And what we ended up doing, we say, hey, we're down the street. If you need anything, let us know. We're here to support you. We didn't ask them to come to church or nothing like that. If you need anything, here's how you can get a hold of us. And the neat thing about it, the years that I was there, I did almost all the funerals in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And got to know a lot of the families, even though a lot of those families never attended church, but they sent their kids.
Yeah.
Is what they ended up doing. And then we moved out to the second mile radius of the church, and all the doors got slammed in our face.
Huh.
And so I just kind of took that as we needed to concentrate on the 1 mile radius, especially the back area of the church.
Mm-hmm.
It was known as Dog Patch. It was identified as Dog Patch, which was kind of a sad name.
Yeah, it was derogatory.
Yeah,
for sure.
And low income area, but we was able to reach out, and most of the kids for Safehouse, the after-school program,
when it was the after-school program,
actually walked from that neighborhood.
I mean, there were so many kids.
Yeah, well, we were averaging 80 to 90 a night.
Yeah.
In some cases that was coming
when
in
we
and
would do, I remember like on a normal weeknight, we were getting in 30, 40, and then we'd do like a special event.
Yeah.
And we'd be pushing 80 to 90.
Correct.
If we did something special. This is not a story within the timeline, but one time we did a pre-prom or pre-homecoming party.
Mm-hmm.
This was years like after we started, but we had well over 100 kids came decked out. I don't know if you remember, that was before your time, Brandon, when you were doing this stuff.
I think it might have been, because I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was so much fun though, because we had a church group that came and made meals and stuff,
right.
and everybody's taking pictures. That was a good time. But yeah, right. They all came from that back neighborhood.
Right. For about a year or two, we just kind of did what we would consider to be the normal church thing.
Right.
And then it began to grow. The vision began to get a little clearer to me. We ended up hiring an individual that came, and one of the things I tried to do early on was try to identify different leaders within the organization nationally that could help us.
Yeah.
And we ended up getting some key players. Russ Cavender.
Yeah.
Cavender. Sorry, Russ. Russ was there. He was key. Jimmy and Becky Davis.
Yeah, they were my first youth pastors, Becky and Jimmy.
Yeah.
When I was a kid growing up, and so super, formative for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they I remember this is a funny story. Jimmy used to chew sunflower seeds, like with the shells or whatever.
Yeah.
And one time he's like, "You want to go for a ride?" Like we were going to pick up something for church or whatever, and I got in his car and he had bottles full of, and he drove an hour. He
right.
worked at Best Buy in Canton or something. I don't remember. He drove a bunch. He's like, "This is what I do when I'm driving. It just keeps me busy chewing sunflower seeds." And I remember for probably about 6 months, because I'm a kid. I'm like 12, 13 years old at this point, and you got your youth pastors, right? I bought so many sunflower seeds that I could. I didn't buy them, but I was like, Mom's like, "What do you want from the grocery store?" Sunflower seeds in the shell, right? And I would sit there and I'd just chew on these sunflower seeds, and this is totally random, but I get so mad that every time I chew them, I could never get the shell in half the way Jimmy did when he was driving. So anyway, out of all of the things that Becky and Jimmy have impacted me with, one thing that stands out for sure is that I don't know how to chew sunflower seeds.
I'm sure that's not going to make their day, considered how much they
they're like all of that time and effort, and that's the thing you remember. Thanks a lot. No, if you're listening, Becky and Jimmy, it's way more than that, but I just thought that was such a funny story, the sunflower seeds. Becky and Jimmy, and they knew Russ, right? Because I think that Jimmy and Russ went to college together, and that whole circle was kind of connected. So Russ was a youth pastor at another church and kind of transitioned out of that. And
correct.
Came and he was great. I remember working with him for years and years.
Another, I think, key leadership group of people that came in was also Barkey Bryant.
Yeah, he led worship forever.
And they and his wife ended up getting married, Crystal. They got married while they were still leadership with us. And so we had some key pieces of the puzzle that came together.
Barkey from camp. No?
Nope.
Man, he must have been there right before you started coming to camp, Brandon, huh?
Yeah, I don't think I do that. I'd remember a name like Barkey.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah. Full of energy. He'd say, if you hear the name Barkey and you're like, I can imagine what he'd be like. It's exactly that.
Yeah, his kids are a lot like him now, I think.
That's awesome.
But there was some,
shout out to those guys.
There were some key people that was throughout the course of the 11 years that really helped us to grow and really got the vision and got a hold of the vision. And then we ended up having what I consider to be transplant people. where there were some people that moved from other churches that came in because they were excited about what we were doing. There was a clear vision of how to reach the community, and we were doing fairly well. We ended up filling the sanctuary, which would hold about 80 people comfortably.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the board, the church board, and saying that we needed to move into the gymnasium, and they were like, "Why? We're just now full." And I'm like, "Yeah, but we won't be able to grow. We won't be able to maintain this because people were shoulder
starting
to shoulder,
to get a little uncomfortable."
And what I think the biggest obstacle that we found in the church world at that particular time was that there was a lot of people locked into the norm, and to break that norm was very difficult.
Yeah.
We really struggled in breaking the norm, and so with Russ and doing some different things, we ended up basically I kind of cast the vision. I think it was like for 9 months that we needed to move into the gym, and we needed to convert the church building as a whole, that we could operate daily with youth.
Now, what was interesting is I remember all these conversations, and I remember that you were hitting a bunch of roadblocks. And again, I'm a young teenager at this point. I'm probably, I don't know, 13, 14, 15. I mean, I'm in this barely teenager kind of thing. And you had made a bunch of changes already that people kind of thought were wild. It's something so simple as getting rid of this big bulky podium.
Yeah.
Right. We got rid of this big bulky podium. You had talked about getting rid of the pews, and people pushed back on that because it was they such and such donated it and stuff like that.
Well, it was a little stage. I mean, it was smaller than this area here when we first started, and had the huge podium on it. And then we built the stage out, put an altar in front of the stage, and then one of the local people, I would consider to be the influencers of the church. When I changed and went to a little podium that I handmade, they called it the stick, and they didn't like it. They didn't like it at all. They wanted the big podium that was behind there, but I felt disconnected from everybody. And that was kind of the beginning of the disruption, as we begin to go through the process of trying to bring change to the local church.
Right.
Was that as long as we did and I'm going to use this word, and it might offend some people that's listening, but every church has what I believe is controllers. And they're, if you're not careful, the controllers of the church, and these are people that have invested their time, their money, their energy.
They legitimately feel like they have a right to some of that, though.
And probably do.
Right.
Okay. As a leader looking at it, they do have a right to that. You're not there to mandate what you need to do, but I was brought in to grow the church. And so when we began to see growth, then I began to see the pushback, because what happened was the controllers were losing control.
Yeah.
And they were really having a hard time with it. And we were working, and I spent about 9 months to try to get everybody convinced we were going to go to the church, or from the church sanctuary to the gym, and then convert the church sanctuary into an after-school program. That's what we wanted to do. And so finally just push back, and I was praying about it, and I really felt that I had a mandate from God that we needed to go. And so I got with all the leaders and said, I set some metal chairs up in the gym.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a stage, and I said, today I'm not going to preach from here, but I'm going to preach from the gym.
So to give everybody a picture as you finish this, the sanctuary was like the kind of the main part of the building. And then when you walked out of the sanctuary, there was a foyer area.
Correct.
Right. And so when people we had an entrance, because we lived on the property, the parsonage, the church owned the house that we lived in. So we would walk, and the entrance that we'd walk into went right into the sanctuary.
Correct.
And then where people would park to attend service, there was an entrance that went into the foyer.
Right.
And then you turn to the right, and there's the sanctuary. You turn to the left, there's a gymnasium.
Right.
Right. And then in the foyer, there's bathrooms area. And so I'll never forget this. You said, we're not doing church from here today. We're doing it from the gym.
Correct.
And then what'd you do?
I grabbed the stick.
You grabbed the podium that you built.
Yeah. I grabbed the stick.
You hoisted it over your shoulder.
I put it over my shoulder, and I walked down the middle of the alleyway.
And you had Mom carry your Bible.
Yep. And then all the praise and worship guys grabbed their stuff and moved. No one knew what was happening. It was just like when I got up there, it was like, I can't preach from here today. I need to show them what this is going to be like.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't prepped anybody on. So we moved in, sat down. There was a little bit of grumblings, but we had church service. And I remember casting a vision that day. I said, listen, let's put this in the hands of God. I said, we need around $10,000 to build a stage, an addition on the back of the gym. And I said, if this is God, and we needed to get some money for pew chairs, comfortable pew chairs. I said, if this is God, he'll pay for it. I remember saying that Sunday morning. And the neat thing about it was for the last year, I'd been casting a vision to different business people in the community and really hitting roadblocks left and right.
Yeah.
And it was funny because on that Tuesday, after I preached that message, we got a $10,000 check from the DeBartolo Corporation with a little note that said, hey, was thinking about you over the weekend. Feel like this would help you with your vision. And I hadn't talked to her in months.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this check just came out of the blue. And I was so excited because it was like, yeah, I just preached that if this is God's will, he'll pay for it. He'll pay for it. I'm going to get everybody on board because there was some big grumbling. So, some people did not like what I had done.
Yeah. And
they were really trying to push back. And then a day or two later after that, we got a check from another company for $1,000.
Yeah. And
so I was stoked. I didn't tell anybody.
The ball is rolling.
Yeah, it's like, okay, let's go. And so the conversation that I'd had with some of the people in the church that were kind of against it was, well, if we do this, we'd have to find someone to buy the pews. We're not just going to throw the pews out. We'd have to find someone to buy the pews, to buy the pew chairs.
Yeah.
And so when I saw the $11,000 that came in the mail unexpectedly, and I mean, $11,000 is $11,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. And they, so I called a church up and I said, hey, do you know of anybody that's looking for pews? And just so happens they did. So they had someone call me from Pittsburgh that night and said, we're interested in the pews. We'll buy the pews. And so I kind of negotiated the pews after I talked to a few people, not the controllers, but a few people. And I said, what do you all think? And they said, yeah, let's go for it. And so I made a deal, not a committed deal, but a deal that we would get the pews, and we got enough money for the pews that we could buy these real expensive pew chairs. They were like $50-$60 a piece, and they were very comfortable. And so I went in on Sunday morning with this huge check.
I remember you got this huge check, and this has been a thing throughout my entire life, is that I have decent handwriting, right? And so, like, I don't know, like a young teenager, like I keep saying, and you said, hey, write on this, and I can't remember what you had me write, but you had pulled a phrase from the Bible about how God is our provider,
right?
And like that was what you had me write in the memo line, and it was this big like sheet of paper that like rolled out.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it because I'm writing it, and Mom went, "Oh no!" And I was like, "What?" She said, "You spelled the word wrong," and I had to like figure out how to like fix it. And I'm like, "Oh great, this is like a big moment." And then church.
Yeah, we had the signature on the bottom of God.
Yeah, and it was it was
a big deal. I thought everybody was just going to go crazy.
I'm not going to lie. I'm hearing this story now, and I'm like, well, that was super cheesy. But like in the moment, there's this super big, exciting, incredibly like God ordained moment where everything, and I'm sure that everybody who didn't want to make these changes was like laying out these stipulations thinking, well, it's not going to happen. So we're not going to have to worry about it.
Right.
And then it just kept lining up.
Yeah.
And it's not lining up in spite of them. It's not lining up because they didn't want it. It's lining up because like the vision's bigger than a personality. The vision's bigger than the person.
Correct.
And God had this thing that he set out to do, and we just had to follow.
And deep down, they wanted what was best for the church. They had been there the whole time and paid the bills and kept it afloat through all the turmoil that was going on. And so there was a lot of good in these people. They were just not ready for a vision to change so dramatically because it changed their vision.
Right.
Their vision was this little church with 80 people in it that would come together and they'd be able to pay the bills and cut the grass and the place would look good. And then I came in and God began to birth within me this new vision.
More. Yeah.
And it began to expand to be more than just them.
And not more people, but more service, more risk, more sacrifice.
And I remember holding that check up and preaching the message. And I remember handful of people sitting there with their arms crossed, and they were mad.
Yeah.
I mean, in that particular time, I said, and then I called for that evening. No, it was after church service that day. I said, we're going to ask all the visitors to leave, and I just want the main
This
core
was after church.
of the church to stay. And I remember a few of them screaming at me and hollering at me.
Made me leave. Like you told me
I knew
separately.
it was going to be bad.
You told me separately that I wasn't allowed to stay.
Right.
And I remember, I think that you tried to get Mom to step out, and Mom wouldn't.
Right.
Because I remember after this meeting, Mom was a mess because she was very protective of you, and these people were very upset. They said some very hurtful things.
And
I
just
remember
just out of the blue,
looking back, that was kind of the first time. We talk about these roadblocks and these potential like hiccups in the vision of how we've gotten to where we are today, and that was really the first time I can recall things just not working easily. It was.
I remember one of the people came up to me and he said, "It's not that we're against what you're trying to do. We just feel that it's the wrong timing." And I remember sitting there and looking at her, and I said, "I agree with you 100%."
Yeah.
And she said, "Then why are you doing it?" I said, "Because we should have done it 9 months ago."
Yeah, it's too late. It's not too early.
It's wrong timing. We're way behind is where we're at. And so we made the move, and we built the stage on the back of the gymnasium, and we bought the pew chairs, and we sold the pews, and there was a big disruption. But prior to that moment of that disruption, we decided that we wanted to build a bookstore. And we had talked to the international offices, and at that time, their vision had changed. In fact, I've got a few pictures of it here. It was called White Wing Bookstore.
Yeah,
we'll throw it up on it.
To give some context to that, the church that you were a senior pastor of in the local context was a part of a international organization.
Correct.
And that international organization also had, as part of its business, a Christian bookstore.
Yes.
And so they had multiple stores.
They had one or two at that time.
And that's just total.
Right. Their vision was to do, I think, 50 nationwide.
Okay.
And we were asked because of our contact with Jimmy Davis, with the director of the White Wing Bookstore at that time,
right?
If we would consider building a building. And we had owned some land. That's another story. But we had owned some land across the street that we had bought. And so we decided that, and you and I had had conversations for a long period of time about what business could we create that would fund the after-school program.
We wanted to be able to serve the community without asking for handouts.
Correct.
Like we've always had a pushback on asking people to give,
to donate,
and we do, and people have been very generous, and it's how it works, but I've always, especially now that I run a nonprofit, on my own with the team that I have, it's my least favorite part of my job.
Right.
And there's people that are made for it, and they do great jobs.
Right.
And they make tons, they get tons of income in for the organizations that they serve. I would rather go out and just give and just serve, and I don't like asking people for money. They work hard for it.
Right.
I don't like being told no, and you're going to get more no's than yeses. I'd rather just go say yes to a bunch of people and how I can serve them.
Yeah.
And so we've always talked about, even when we first started, how do we create this self-contained, like
funding,
self-funded thing so we could do it. And so the bookstore was at that point a way to potentially partner with the church and the vision of the youth ministry, to fund a youth ministry, which at that point we had only talked about, and Russ had this big vision about this like day-to-day like idea of serving kids, giving them a place to come when they don't have anything else to do, not expecting them to just come to church one day a week. And so the bookstore was kind of a part of this whole thing, and they all kind of interwove the timeline. We had these conversations, but we weren't doing anything about it, and we kind of put a pin in it. And then the bookstore became a possibility, and we thought, well, if this works, then maybe it can help this.
This might be the answer to what we wanted to do.
So we had land that was right across the street it was next to, across the little side street.
Well, we had bought it. We had bought it for $5,000. I remember praying over it and finding out that it was available, and we were able to buy it. We bought it for $5,000. And then there was another, 3 or 4 acres in the back that we needed, and we bought that also.
Right.
And so to speed up a little bit what we're talking about, we decided to go ahead and do the bookstore, and
Jimmy managed it.
Yep, Jimmy managed it. At the prior of it, there was some, we got a picture of
there's the groundbreaking in the middle of winter.
groundbreaking
Why are
of
we
it.
always building in the winter?
I don't know. It seems
Always
like
building
always
in the
that
winter.
way. And so, at first everybody was on board and was like, yeah, great, let's do it. And we had different pictures of,
oh my gosh,
of different. You see some of those.
People are gonna think that this is me.
Yeah, it's not. It's me.
When he showed me the picture, I thought it was you.
You thought it was me.
We'll put it on there.
You guys have such strong genes. It's crazy.
That is wild.
Incredible.
If you're not watching this YouTube and you're listening on a podcast, I don't know what to say. Please go watch the YouTube because you have to see these pictures.
Yeah. And then while we were just about ready to finish the bookstore, I got a picture here of you working, and Courtney was in it
Courtney,
too.
a little cameo from Courtney.
Yeah. And,
oh my gosh.
So we made it a family kind of dealing that was there. And then, of course, the last picture is when we had it finally open and the director was there with us and everything. And so the first year or so of the bookstore went really good. How
big was the building? Do you remember the square footage?
5,000
square feet.
Yep. And it went really good and the vision was strong. And then all of a sudden, internationally, the vision changed. There was a disruption in
for the church or for the bookstore?
For the bookstore.
Okay.
And internationally it changed. And then 9/11 hit, and that didn't help.
So obviously we're in 2001 right now.
Right. And we ended up getting into a crazy cash flow kind of problem, and we couldn't get product because the international offices had decided that they were not going to do 50 stores, and that everybody that was kind of independent or had went through this, process, you were going to be all by yourself now. And so at this point...
So you didn't have the international support now?
No, and anything that we did get from them looked like it was hand-me-down stuff. And so we couldn't provide the product to... So the bookstore failed shortly after that.
Because wasn't there... And you had made every effort to try to, continue that bookstore vision, because wasn't there, a bookstore that was struggling in PA?
Yeah, we sat down with the board and some of the people that we consider to be, the influencers of the church that were struggling with the changes that we were doing with the after-school program. We'd sit down with them and the state office and the international offices, and everybody decided that we would go buy another bookstore in McKeesport, PA.
Kind of with the hope that doubling the idea would increase some revenue, and we could kind of
so we ended up
paying
that revenue $90,000 out of that for that. And
that didn't work. It just didn't work.
It didn't work. It didn't work at all. In fact, what we ended up doing was we strapped ourselves financially. The one thing that was neat, or that not neat, but neat thinking back on it now,
hindsight,
is that when everybody was on board when the vision looked good, but it was very quickly how everybody walked away when it began to get tough. And one of the leadership lessons I've learned in a long time with that process is that the people that you think that's going to follow you through the vision,
not always accurate.
Not always are going to follow you when it gets tough.
Yeah.
And
now a lot of people did. Well, I want to be clear that there was a lot of people that did, and even up to now,
right?
They're not connected the same way they were.
No,
but they still support the vision.
Correct.
They still are there. They still believe in the vision. But then there are others that are we can't. We're not going to do this.
And it wasn't a big handful; it was a small handful of people that I consider to be the disruptors of the vision, and that their goal was, after they saw it going the way it was going, that their goal was going to be to try to stop it as much as possible. And I think the underlying current in what you're going to hear over the next 3 or 4 weeks is that there was people that got connected to a vision, and then as the vision began to get a little stress on it or begin to change from what they thought it should be, then some of those people became enemy number one.
Right.
And I think that's a reoccurring theme that you'll see in the next 2 or 3 weeks as we share things. And so
the bookstore hit some tough times, and it failed.
It failed.
And at this same point, though, when we were building the bookstore, we had converted the old sanctuary that we had left and gone into the gym into what became the very first ever Safehouse After-School Program space.
Yes.
We had cut the sanctuary basically in half. You built 4 classrooms. There was a middle hallway, which ironically is the same. The hallway was the aisle that you carried the podium down.
Correct.
And then it opened up into this big space. And this was like I said, late 99, early 2000. And you could tell by the design, we had like spray paint flames on the walls.
Yeah.
There was an old Safehouse kid that lived in that back neighborhood area. His name's Chris.
Yeah.
And he's an artist and he paints, and when he started, it was like graffiti-ish type art.
Yep.
And he painted, this was with Russ. He painted, Russ was an artist as well. So they painted these like flames on the walls and like these bright colors. And we like cut out these like just foam pieces that we designed.
Do you remember Russ's office?
I do. It was a cage. It was a fence.
Yeah,
we went and got this high, like chain link fence basically. And we put up these posts, and that was his office. The man worked in a cage. That's like, we put him in a cage. That's and he was happy about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We would have been arrested and thrown in jail and lost our jobs at this point if that was how we build offices now. But he would it had like a flip down door latch, and he'd lock it when he left, and nobody could get in. It was a cage.
Right.
And so we had in this room we had a pool table, we had a Nintendo GameCube. We're aging ourselves. We had like whatever Xbox was popular at the time, which I think was the first generation Xbox. And one of the nights we just opened up the doors and we said, we had kids that were coming to Sunday morning services. Right. They were sitting in their gym shorts and tank tops with a basketball, and they wanted to play basketball in the gym on Sunday afternoons. And we said, if you do, you can just come to church, sit through the service with us, and then you can have the gym for the rest of the day. And they would come looking crazy, like just ready to play basketball.
Right.
Sneakers, gym shorts, tank tops, basketball, sitting next to them. They didn't engage. They didn't stand up for worship. We didn't expect them to. We just wanted them in the building. And then it was several weeks into that we said, what if we did something, right? Like during the day. And the whole time we were like converting this property. We're like it's all kind of swirling and happening at the same time. And then this vision that Russ had for something that had been on his heart for years before this started to like evolve.
Correct.
And we started to everything started to marry together. And so we converted the old sanctuary. It turned into, there was 4 classrooms where we did Sunday school. And then there was the talk of what do we do with the big space?
Right.
And it was going to be like a conference room or like a meeting center or like whatever. And then it became that first Safehouse space because we wanted to do something during the week for kids.
And we would stay open from 3 to 9.
3 to 9, Monday through Saturday. I think Saturday the hours were like 12 to 8 or something like that. And the first time we did it, we didn't expect anybody. I remember we're just going to open the doors and we're going to serve some pizza. We're going to play some games. We're going to do like a 15-minute little devotional idea. And then we're going to hang out and then they're going to go home and then we'll see what happens. The first Monday, there was like 30 plus kids that just randomly showed up.
Right.
And we're like, we didn't even know like where we figured they all came from that neighborhood behind the church, but we had never seen some of them before.
Correct.
And so they played basketball in the gym. When it was time, we'd be like, all right, let's go eat some pizza. And then after we'd eat some pizza, we'd do this little devotion and then they'd play games. And then that just developed. It just grew and grew. We asked them, I think, do you want to do this again tomorrow? And of course they're like, yeah. So we started doing it daily. And that's when the hours became Monday through Friday after school, 3 to 8. In the summer, we were doing camps still. We mentioned the camps last week. And so that was really the initial Safehouse, and we called it Safehouse because we had this acronym, and I don't know if I have a digital copy of the logo. I hope I do. But we had this acronym that was saved and fire ready, and the logo, the S, the A, the F were white, and the E was red.
Yeah, because
we were like, well, we're ready, red E. Again, I mean, we were cool. We thought. I don't know. You guys be the judge of that. Yeah. We were saved and fire ready. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we sure were.
And then house. So saved and fire ready house. Yeah. I mean, it worked for us, and it was great. We had a good time with it. We had that thing painted somewhere behind drywall in that building right now there's the logo still painted on.
Yeah.
Spray painted by Chris. And so we did that daily. That was the first one. And so let's fast forward a little bit. The bookstore, we got to the bookstore where it didn't work. Before we kind of really closed the door on the bookstore, we cut it in half. You built a wall in the middle.
Correct.
The bookstore was half of what it was, and then you rented out the back space to a senior center.
Correct.
For 1-year lease.
And that was just to try to make ends meet.
Right. We were using that income to kind of supplement what we were missing, basically. No,
the church had went in debt for the building, about $300,000, and there was a payment that needed to be paid.
Okay.
And when the bookstore failed, there was nothing there to make the payment. And so kind of a neat story going back, rewinding. When we were putting the roof on the bookstore, a businessman drove by and said, "What are y'all building?" And I told him a bookstore, and he looked at me and kind of laughed, and he goes, "Well, this is the wrong location for that," and drove on. And I have never seen him, up to that point. And I thought, wow, what a nice guy. And so after the bookstore had failed, and for about 6 to 8 months, we had rented it out, and then we decided that we couldn't keep the bookstore open in the front. So we stopped all of that. In the meantime, I had begun to visit different businesses in the area and just tell them I was praying for them that were within the 1 mile radius. Yeah. And I got a meeting with one of the owners of the businesses that was there local, and just shared the vision of what we were doing with youth and stuff like that. Well, not even knowing it, his father came by one night that we were doing prayer walking. Yeah. And his father was a prayer warrior and basically was excited that we had prayer walked, and he came and did some prayer walking with us. So after the bookstore had closed down, we were trying to decide what was going to be happening. And all of a sudden, we got a check in the mail. It was a Monday morning. We had a check in the mail for $20,000.
So this was after the 10 and the 1.
Yep.
Completely separate.
Yep. And it was a company that it was another company that was connected to the man that I had met.
So the man you met had a family member or friend or some sort of connection to a company, and that company's the one who was like, we want to plant this seed. We want to invest. And I didn't even know. It was a donation.
Yeah, I didn't even know who they were. So I called them and said, "What do you want me to do with this? We want you to go use it for youth is what we want to do. And there'll be regular ones that come on a regular monthly basis." So I'm like going crazy, At this time, most of the controllers or most of the influencers that was at the early part of the church, they had gotten mad and left. They were not part of what was going on. When the bookstore failed, everything just kind of went down the tube with a handful of people.
Right.
And it kind of freed the church up a little bit. We even kept growing. But we had a group of people that was in the background that really, really was upset that we were being successful. And
so what did you use the $20,000 for?
To reconvert the bookstore building to the after-school building.
So we took that wall back out.
Yep.
And then we bought more systems and rec stuff.
Right.
We redesigned a little bit.
And we used the whole building for the after-school. We used that
whole 5,000 square foot, and because there were offices behind it. Like there was,
correct.
Like if you go to the back of the building, there's 3 offices, and so that became Safehouse.
Correct.
The after-school program. And now at this point too, because I know at one point Safehouse was basically kind of the youth group name, right, of the church. Like we were doing youth group stuff, but then you had started talking, and we started floating around the idea like we're not connecting to like the kids that we think we can connect to, and one of the reasons why is because we wanted to partner with other churches, right?
Well, what I found out was this: we could get more donations if we had something that wasn't connected to the church.
Because people have their own church that they donate
correct.
to, and businesses support their own. Like if a business owner's going to a church and he's got extra resource, he's going to plant that seed into his local church. So this is the point that I'm getting to, is that we essentially we started floating the idea to establish a separate like nonprofit charity, like a 501c3.
Correct.
That was Safehouse.
Right.
And this is separate from the youth group. This is separate from the church. And it would be its own organization that would be able to get its own income, like its own donations that are then tax deductible, that would not come into the church, right? They would be given to Safehouse.
They would be given to Safehouse.
And this was another like roadblock with people, right? Because people didn't like the idea of money coming into this side program.
Well, you got to understand the culture of the time. The culture of the time was if you did anything different from the denomination,
the church organization,
right? The eyes on you would be, especially if you were successful, the eyes would be that you're getting ready to go independent. You're getting ready to go independent. And I used to get phone calls on a weekly basis saying, I hear you're getting ready to go independent, because this group of people that had left the church because they didn't agree with what we were doing had kept giving the leadership of the corporate or the leadership of the church organization in the state these phone calls. He's doing this, he's doing that, he's going to go take it independent. We're going to lose the building. We're going to lose everything. Blah, 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 blah. And so we went ahead and established Safehouse Ministries in 2004 is what we ended up doing. But the main reason we did it is because we found out that we could get more outside donations, 100% more, okay, that would fund the ministry as a parachurch organization than the local church. And what happened was Safehouse became the money that would support the church.
Right.
So at that time, we could hire pastors and hire extra leaders, and Safehouse was paying basically the salaries of what was going on.
And we also had this thing too. You said parachurch, and that's what reminded me of this. We were open all the time. All right. We were open Monday through Friday.
Right.
Churches were only doing their church stuff Wednesdays.
Correct.
Right. And so we wanted to connect with local churches and say, hey, on the days you're not doing church, let's send your kids here.
Right.
We'll give them something to do. We can partner with you. You can come in as a youth pastor and do like a Monday night devotion.
Right.
Volunteers from your church could come feed the kids. And we kept getting pushback from that because some churches and youth pastors were like, you're going to try to take our kids from us. We don't have this equipment. We don't have this stuff. So we actually we shut down on nights where other churches had services because we said, we don't want that idea. We don't want to feel like we're taking people away from their churches. So if you have a local church, you can't come on a Wednesday night because we're not open.
Right.
We started closing earlier on a Wednesday night and telling people, don't come. And if you don't have a church, we're going to do a small service. Right. For you, like through Safehouse. But if you have a church, go. If you don't have a ride, we'll take you. We were so about the local church because, and when I was in this time frame, I knew that if you wanted to get parents to attend services, reach their kids. Right. Because if a parent notices that a kid's being impacted, they're going to say, what's going on? Oh, I'll go to church. And so these were all just different roadblocks we hit. And that was another like plus to separating the organization from the local church, is that it wasn't connected. It supported and had support from the local church, but it wasn't under the umbrella of a church organization. So it wasn't a church. It was a nonprofit public charity.
Ministry.
Yeah. But from a tax standpoint, they consider it a public charity because we still have the same status as the after school program. We never changed it. And for those of you that don't know, and you're going to hear all about this, but right now in this moment, Safehouse operates solely as a residential treatment facility, which means that we have kids that live in-house. We have 6 houses, 4 residentials and 2 group homes. And they live and they get various treatments.
Correct.
We're still the same company. We're still set up the same way as it was back in 2004. It's just we serve a different person now, a different type of young person.
And we spun off the different ministries. We had a camping ministry. We had the after-school ministry. That was departments of Safehouse that we spun off. And now we have Refuge as the after-school program.
Which Refuge is separate too. Refuge is a separate business. There's we're connected through, handshakes and contracts and ways that we serve people, but they're separate organizations. Right. And so when all of these things are happening and we're separating the organization, we're establishing its own 501c3 number, we're working through all of this, we're getting donations from the outside community into Safehouse more than we're getting income into the church. And all of these things created a bunch of issues. And I know that the church at this point, the state offices were starting to kind of put the screws on you a little bit, saying we're not crazy about the way that you're doing your youth ministry.
Correct. Our youth ministry was in the hundreds. We had more youth coming to our services than we had adults. At that time, and it just didn't fit within the mindset of the state. And I could spend an hour on this alone. But even like camping ministries, we would bring more kids to camp as the state camp that was always there. And we were directors. My wife and I were directors of the state camp, junior camp for years. But we ended up having 60 to 70 kids that would come into a camp that had 100 campers. And so we would be overwhelming. Liberty Church would overwhelm it. And we began to not fit in the box that was there. Yeah. And the pushback was to get us back in the box. Yeah. That was the pushback, was get back in the box. And it's let's expand the box. And so my eyes began to open differently than what the denomination had seen. And I began to see this whole new vision of what could be and everything like that, even to the place that we got so big that we ran our own camp, which really ticked a lot of people off.
And that's where Brandon started attending, right? You started coming to those camps. We used to rent buses. Did you ride the bus to camp?
I did ride the bus.
We used to rent 2 big Anderson, coaches, those big buses. Kids would come to the church. They would sign up, bring their bags. We'd put them in. You remember all this?
I do, yes.
And then
3 or 4 hour bus ride.
It was 2.5, but you were a kid, so it seemed like a lifetime. Yeah. I mean, it might have been longer on a bus, but we would load up we would tag the bags, we'd throw them under the bus. I remember this, like, oh, I hated that day, but it was so exciting too, because like we were going to camp. We would do camp for a week. We'd drive the kids back. And then it got to the point where we needed 2 different camp weeks because of the age group. So we had a junior camp, which was like middle schoolers. Then we had like a high school camp. We set the age a little different.
And just to show you, our camp was free to the campers.
Because of these incredibly generous donations that people would say, we want to provide this to
our last year
kids.
Of camp. We had 2 camps. The budget for that camp was $100,000.
For 1 week, or
that
for
was
the
for
total
both
summer?
For the for the 2
weeks in the summer,
and we had it completely 100% donated in, and so our budgets had exploded. Money was flowing.
This was all under Safehouse, correct?
Correct.
This was not under the local church,
right? Which caused problems because the local church organization or the state organization began to question, what are we doing, and why is all this money here? And we weren't trying to hide anything, but the people that were against the vision to begin with kept on pushing out, I'm doing something wrong, or I must be doing something wrong, and we need to be looked at, and there's all this money that's flowing in and out, and everything that's going on. And basically, Safehouse Ministries have become the funding mechanism for the local church, even to the point that we would just take the offering and just pay a few bills with it, and then Safehouse would take and pay all the salaries and everything that was through that. Looking back at it now, we probably should have did differently than what we did, but not knowing, just kind of learning. But everything was above board. Everybody was able to see what they needed to see, but there was this nagging talk in the background that said we were doing something wrong. And there was growth which became a threat to the state organization, as far as they're going to go independent. They're going to take all this property, and this is the churches. And it was never ever my intention that would ever happen. I just wanted to grow the local church and reach the community of the teens that
we had shifted focus and putting all of our energy, not all of our energy, but you were still doing Sunday morning services at this point. You were still preaching.
Well, we quit Sunday nights.
You had done that early on, which was a different issue
at that point,
which is fine.
Right.
But you were still the pastor of the church at this point, and we still had a vision for the church. And I remember, because this was when I had started to grow up a little more, and I was involved. Like, I had an office at that Safehouse where I was like working with the kids every day. And I was in these meetings about where we were going to go. I'm just a kid. I'm 17 at this point, maybe 16. I can't recall.
You were young.
But I was young, and I was working, though. Like, I was working. And I don't think that I was getting paid yet at this point. No. I was just working because I didn't need to. I worked at a movie theater, and I'd come hang out, and I would help serve some kids.
Made you and Courtney do everything.
And which is fine. I love it. It's taught me a ton of stuff. But this is when we had talked about the church moving from the sanctuary to the gym. It's the first big time where I could recall pushback. This is the time frame where I would hear it. I would hear rumors that would come through the pipeline about oh my gosh, do you know what's going on? Or do you know what you're involved in, and all this other stuff? And I'm like, yes, I know exactly what I'm involved in.
Right.
We're trying to tell people about Jesus.
Crazy rumors. I was addicted to gambling,
right?
And that I was bringing teenagers around me to sell them drugs so that I could fund
your gambling addiction.
Yeah, there was it was nuts on some of the stuff.
That's a true story.
I had people that would call me.
It's not a true story. It's let me be clear. It's not rumor. It's true that was a rumor. That's not a true story. But these are the things that to the point where you had family members that did not even live around here,
right?
That were reaching out to you, going, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
We heard this.
The stress at this time was so bad that Mom came up to me one night, and I had quarter-sized bald spots in the back of my head.
I remember that.
Because I was trying to keep it all together and get the organization to come on board, and we were getting so much pushback, and there was so much of these just blatant rumor bins that were out there. It was almost impossible to try to keep up with it. And it all came to a head. The debt was still there on the bookstore building, even though we were making the payments. And I think there was one payment that came in a little late. And again, I could be wrong on some of it was kind of fuzzy at this time.
Details.
But I think we had got a donation late that we had planned on. And so that caused the bank to call the international office or the state office. And so all of a sudden, I had been called down to Columbus to meet with the heads of the church organization 3 or 4 times. And finally, I got a call. This was in the middle of the summer. I got a call to come down. And I remember that going down and thinking, okay, we'll just work through this again. But they had a different agenda at that time. And at that time, they basically said, you have 1 week to eliminate the $300,000 debt. And why isn't the state organization getting their cut of the donations that you're getting at Safehouse? And because the church organization at that time, the local church pays a percentage to the state pays a percentage to the international offices. And since Safehouse was separate by itself,
it was a different organization,
right? We didn't pay that tithe to the local or to the state,
right?
We didn't,
and you weren't required to,
and we weren't required to. But they wanted a piece of the puzzle
because the money was coming in.
There was big money. We were getting anywhere between $15,000-$20,000 a month to do ministry.
Yeah,
is what we were doing. So they wanted their cut, is what they wanted. So the pressure that you put on me was, you eliminate the debt of the bookstore, or we're going to ask you to quit pastoring. And it shocked me. I went, what? They said, you have 1 week to come up with the $300,000, or we're going to go ahead and ask you to step down as pastor. I remember driving from Columbus. My sister Vicky would remember this. Driving from Columbus to Cambridge. I couldn't come home yet.
Yeah.
And I cried. I wept the whole way, because I've been raised in this organization.
Yeah.
It was my family. It was the nastiest 2 hours of my life, of trying to think, I have nowhere to live because I'm living in a parsonage. So I have nowhere to live. The building that we were using for the after-school program was owned by the church. We were paying the mortgage, but it was owned by the church, and that we were going to have to leave. We were going to have to completely shut down and leave. Well, the rumor bin went through the church, and then the church all began to gather around us and say, we'll go with you. Let's go independent. And I'm like, I'm not going independent.
Right.
I'm not going to go independent. And we had 2 weeks of camp
coming up.
This camp coming up the very next week. And I remember sitting down with a businessman. He said, you go do camp. And I know we've been kind of rattling on a little bit, but I want to get to this point here at the end.
This is the climax of this story right here. This is the point.
He said, you go to camp. And I said, I said, in a couple weeks, we don't have a place to have kids come in. My paychecks are going to stop because I can't have the program. So we're not going to be able to raise money through the program. I have no place for the kids to go. I have nowhere to live. He said, you go do camp. So we went and did camp. And I remember you were the evangelist for the week.
Every night at both camps.
Right. And I think you even mentioned, like on a Thursday or Wednesday night
one
of
the camp nights, that in a week we don't have a place to live.
Right. We were homeless.
Yeah.
And part of me was mad because the people that I had relied on, and I was just trying to do what I believe was God's vision, had basically made me homeless. And I think
jobless.
And so everything just kind of came to a crashing halt. Even that week during camp, I was kind of in a numb, knowing that we were going to go back home on Friday, and we were going to have to start packing. And I had nowhere to go. And so I was thinking, well, we're going to move into an apartment. We had never lived in an apartment. And that, I was going to have to possibly go and do something different to try to bring money in to put food on the table.
Because at this point, the church and Safehouse was your full-time job.
Correct.
Like we told the story about Murphy's Soap.
Right.
And how it got, at one point, that job was no longer.
Right.
You put all of your energy into the church. So there was no backup plan.
No,
like this was just what it was.
Correct. And so we came back, I think it was Friday around noon, and this businessman had called me and said, I heard camp was incredible. And I said, we had an incredible camp. He said, I need to meet with you. He said, meet me at the office. He said, bring your wife. And so me and Angie went, and he said, so do you have a plan yet? And I said, nope, we don't have a plan. I don't
Just got back from camp.
Just got back
from camp.
Don't know what we're doing. I figure I'll start looking for apartments. He said, well, come with me. So he had 2 other people that was with him, and we drove to a neighborhood in Liberty Township, nice neighborhood. And there was 2 houses. There was a white house and tan house. And we walked through the white house, and me and Andrew was kind of looking at each other like, why are we walking through this? This is a $160,000 home. There's no way we can afford this house. And then we walked through the tan house, and then the businessman looked at Angie and said, which one do you like? And she said, well, I like the tan one. And then he looked at me and he said, okay. He said, we have already supplied all the funding that you need. Our company and a few other companies are going to continue to give donations to Safehouse. Your salary is going to stay the same. We're going to provide you with enough money that you won't lose your salary. and we've been able to raise $60,000 for a down payment for your house.
Wow.
And I remember Mom and I standing there and just began to cry. We still live in that house.
Yeah, you still
today.
live there. My
Okay.
kids play in that backyard.
That's right. And so within a matter of a couple weeks, everything was resolved. And we moved from the old parsonage to the new house and had enough money to buy a bunch of new stuff and repaint it inside and rechange the deck on the back and just basically, it was just a God moment.
Right.
And then for a period of time when we went from, trying to find a place to do the after school program, and there was a lull between that. And another very sad story in this process of that, you need to be careful that, you follow God's plan of what's going on, because there's lives that can be changed in a dramatic way, in a sad way. We had a young lady that we closed the after school program down
because we had to move out. We had to move out, so it was shut down for a while.
Yep. And you go ahead and tell the story.
We'll talk more about it in next week's episode too, and how it kind of impacted us. But her name was Jessica. She had come all the time, and she had gotten pregnant and had a baby, and then like a lot of unfortunate things happened where she lost family members, and other family members were in jail. She was put in a foster care
system.
She was put in she had lived with her sister, and the reason why they had allowed her the foster care, like the children's services allowed her to keep her child, because she had support.
Right.
And her older sister, got drunk one night, went and lit some candles, passed out in her trailer. The trailer caught fire, and the sister unfortunately perished in the fire. And so that left her without the support. And so she used to come. I remember when she came and told us at Safehouse that she was pregnant and she was scared, and we were there to support her. And
let's leave this for another
We'll leave
day.
it for another week.
Yeah.
And I mean, check back in next week to hear the rest of the story. It's not a great story, but what it does is it drives us now. Like our vision has always been to focus in on finding what the need is and simply meeting the need with no strings attached, no questions. And so we're going to start to wrap up, but I want to focus in on this thing right here, that through this story, and we've got dozens of these stories. I mean, literally dozens of these stories where we are at the edge, right? Where it's like, it's done. Tomorrow is the end of it. I'm going to go work at Walmart or Starbucks or a retail store, or I'm going to go try to find a managerial position somewhere, whatever it may be, because like this vision is hit its peak.
If God doesn't show up, things change dramatically tomorrow in a way that we never thought.
And he's never not shown up. And so
we still live, and I don't want to cut you off, but
no, you're fine.
We still live in a house that I believe God gave us.
Right.
And in the point that we were homeless, and God showed up, you might say, well, it was the businessman that did it. Okay, but it was God that used the businessman,
the vision
to move it forward, because it was still a very tough time for us for about a year. I really struggled in not being part of the church organization for a period of time. And then the rumors really hit hard after we had left. Like I had embezzled money, and there was all this stuff that had gone wrong, and I had bankrupted the state because we basically walked away, and so the payments didn't get paid. And there was just this horrendous amount of bad talk that I know Courtney a couple times was like, Dad, aren't you going to say something? And I'm like, the truth will come out in time. Yeah. And a lot of those people that, was part of the vision moving forward, and all of a sudden are like, well, we don't like it anymore. They became, some of them still today are still enemy number one. I don't have any, but they won't speak to me. If I run into them in the public, they won't have anything to do with me. We actually tried to get invited back to the local church just a few months ago. And I met with the pastor that was there, and he said, I don't think it's going to be a problem, but let me talk. And he ended up going back and talking to the people.
And you haven't heard from him.
And we haven't heard from him since. And so,
not even like, maybe not, like just not.
Right, just nothing, just silence, which I know. And
which
that's
is okay too. It's okay. It's
and
like,
again, I don't have any animosity against anybody that we went through. It was a tough time. I'm not sure why we had to go through it that we did, but we learned a tremendous amount of lessons, especially with business, that I've used those business principles on the failure to help us be successful today, business-wise. And so it was like a boot camp time for me, And but as far as everybody that we talked and what we consider to be the controllers or the influencers of the church, at that time. I have no hard feelings against them whatsoever. I pray for them on a regular basis. I wish the best for them. We had to go through this
in order to
be where we're at today.
And that's the point.
That's the whole point
of what we're trying to do. And we're 2 episodes into this, and we've told a lot of stories about our experience and our stuff personally. Not every episode's going to be like that. This podcast is about challenging and encouraging and talking life stuff. But we feel it's important that we set like a firm kind of background about how we ended up where we are and the lessons that we've learned and why, like, sometimes what you think is going to be a negative, and it is a negative,
very much,
is not going to stay a negative. Like the Bible is full of stories of how God takes something bad and turns it into good, and what's meant for evil turns out to be good. And it's not about, sometimes it's not about what you do in those situations. It's about what you don't do and how you don't like react in a negative way. And it's not about like what you do or don't do. Sometimes it's about who you trust and who you lean on. And so these are all things that, so if you're listening to this, we're an hour in, you're like, oh my gosh, like they're talking a lot about themselves. We want to make sure that you guys understand that this is just background. Like we're just trying to set a tone. We're trying to tell some stories. We're trying to, and in some ways clear the air a little bit too, because there's still some of this stuff that we hear about.
Yeah. I think this is the first time that I've actually been able to sit down and talk it out in its detail on how we viewed it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more to it than what we've even said today. But the end result is this, that if you're in a dark time, if it looks like everybody has left you, if it looks like everything that you've planned to move through, I want you to understand that there's a bigger plan that's involved here. If you're following God and you're trying to follow direction of God and a vision that God's placed upon your heart, you've got to go through some of these moments for it to birth within you and find out if it's just a pipe dream or if it's truly a vision from God.
Yeah.
And that's the end result of what I want to try to get across as I'm sharing some of these stories of what we consider to be. This is now the second, what we would consider to be disruptions.
Yeah, just big
in the vision.
Benchmark moment.
And so, I've enjoyed my time with you today.
Yeah, it's always great hearing these. And we're getting some feedback from the first week. They're like, wow, I never heard that story before. Right. And so there's a lot of those. And again, it's really just about trying to set a groundwork and say, like, God can use anything.
Absolutely.
And we're a testament to that. Like, we're not super highly educated. We're not like, we don't come from a long line of church leaders, right? Like, we're not, like, we're just people who caught a vision and we're trying to serve people. And so more stories next week. We're excited. Again, if you are watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. Click that subscribe button, because the more subscribers that we get, the more opportunity we have to kind of personalize stuff and kind of make it grow. So just click that subscribe button there and you'll get updates of when we are posting this. If you listen to your podcast through iTunes, subscribe to that, like, and then it'll just, when it gets uploaded, it'll just pop up on your playlist and you'll be ready to go. It's available on Spotify and SoundCloud as well. So with that, Brandon, thanks a lot, man. Another one down.
Absolutely.
Now we get to edit this one up and
you didn't fall asleep again this week.
Yep. Nope. I'm wide awake. Had a triple shot.
He had a triple shot this morning.
Oh,
he went for a double, and so he's hearing color at this point.
Triple shot of what?
A triple shot.
Starbucks canned drink.
Oh, okay.
It's just caffeine in a can.
I need to get away from it. I usually only do Monday and Fridays.
You do.
Yeah. So we record these a couple days before they get posted, so we have time to edit them and get them together. So this is going to be Mondays is when they drop. Every Monday you can look for it, and we're excited. So please engage, everybody. Touch base, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Safehouse RSD, and with that we'll wrap up. Dad, thanks again.
No
Brandon,
problem.
Another good one. We'll talk to you guys next week.
See you
soon.